Right Honourable Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this very, very important statement made by our colleague, Honourable Dr. Zaneto Rawlings, not Zenato, Zaneto Ajman Rawlings. I hear the Deputy Majority Leader always say Zenato. So whilst he's here, I'm just trying to say that it's Zaneto Ebuje. So pronounce properly, Zaneto. Mr. Speaker, I also want to take the opportunity to commend all the men and women
Honorable Leader.
Yes.
Just for the records, I don't remember ever wrongly pronouncing the name of my respected colleague. So I just want my colleague Abuja to withdraw that aspect of his submission and go ahead with his submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, he didn't even say who I said. The name I said, he pronounced wrongly. So there's no case at this moment. There's no case because he never told me who I said he pronounced wrongly. So thank you for the. No, Mr. Speaker, does he have the opportunity to come on point of order twice on the same issue? I don't think so. So I'll proceed until you stop, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
Honorable, hold on. You are accusing him of pronouncing somebody's name wrongly. And he said he didn't. So just do the honors and let's move on.
Mr. Speaker, I've been doing cross-examination for more than 10 years. I will not respond to this bait. What I'm saying is that he claims that I often pronounce that name wrongly. What you mentioned. And I'm saying that withdraw that aspect of the submission unless you have some evidence to support your claim. It is never correct. So withdraw and go ahead with your comment. That's all.
Yes. Leader, just withdraw and let's
Mr. Speaker, at least you said I said you pronounced a certain name. You haven't even mentioned it. So what am I withdrawing? So mention the name you said you haven't pronounced wrongly, then I'll withdraw. So mention it. Go ahead.
I think this is right. You have to rule on it and direct him because you have directed him to do the needful. If you would want to overindulge him, so be it. I leave it to you.
Leader, just withdraw. Just withdraw and let's withdraw.
Mr. Speaker, I withdraw what he said I've accused him of not doing.
What did you say?
Well, I don't even remember what he said I said. So if he says it, then I'll remember, then I'll withdraw. But since he didn't mention, I have withdrawn what he said I have wrongly accused him of. Case closed.
He should be a gentleman. He says that the honorable member for colleague Clotilde's name, I often pronounce it wrongly. And I'm saying that he should withdraw that statement. That I often, well, that's fine. No problem. That's fine. Correct me. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member who made the statement, he says, I often pronounce a name wrongly. And I'm saying that he should withdraw that statement that I often pronounce a name wrongly from the record. He should withdraw it. If he has forgotten, then I've reminded him. He should withdraw and proceed with his comment. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, I take your directive. A number of colleagues in this house, I'll get there, have wrongly, and it's on record, pronounced the name of the honorable member, Honorable Dr. Zaneto Ajman Rawlings, calling it Zenato, and the record to prove. And I'm saying that I have heard in the past, the respected deputy leader also said Zenato instead of Zaneto. He's saying he's never pronounced it Zenato. Yes, it's Zaneto. Let the darkness cease. Zaneto. Oh, I said Zaneto is the name. Mr. Speaker, all of a sudden he's remembered. But I've withdrawn. Mr. Speaker, I also want to take the opportunity to congratulate the
leader.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, I said that I've heard him. When he says he's never pronounced that name wrongly, I withdraw. Mr. Speaker, I want to take the opportunity to congratulate our men and women in uniform who are the subject of our colleagues' statement, which is very important. Whilst my colleague was making the statement, whilst my colleague who contributed just before me was making the statement, he also commended the founder of the Fourth Republic, who is the founder of the NDC. And yes. I said the founder of the Fourth Republic is Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings, whose name actually boldly appears in the Constitution, that the Fourth Republican Constitution, rightly so. And that will go down the history of our country. Mr. Speaker, it's not controversial at all. It's not controversial at all. This says that made on this 8th day of May, 1992, Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings, Chairman of the Provisional National Defense Committee. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I didn't realize that PNDC is even available in our Constitution, but some people say we shouldn't listen. Mr. Speaker, let me go on. The subject of this statement is very important, Mr. Speaker. The majority leader has always recommended that the committee system we operate in Parliament here creates a situation where we are unable to function properly, or the committees are unable to function properly, because many of us came to this House on the minimum threshold set by the Constitution, which is in terms of age, of sound mind, and others. But you come to Parliament and you are put in a committee, for instance, of Defense and Interior. And there's an unfortunate situation somewhere within the country. And Speaker rightly directs the Committee on Defense and Interior to investigate and report. So our honorable colleague is asking the question, does the committee have the capacity to understand the technical issues, operational issues of the security agencies to the extent that they can investigate and provide any information to the House for us to peruse? And I think this is very important. Mr. Speaker, people turn up in this House and are put in Health Committee. Indeed, you can build the capacity of any member of Parliament to actually perform better in a certain capacity. But I think beyond a certain level, we need expertise from outside Parliament. And that is why I always want to commend the majority leader who believes that Parliament must have that capacity outside of this House that we can follow, that can provide us independent views on certain technical issues. And I agree with my colleague, Honorable Kujeto, who says that hopefully when the new standing order comes into effect, there might be, and then Parliament actually funds it properly, we might have the opportunity where Parliament have a pool of expertise that can advise us on things that ordinary members of the committee may not be able to have an understanding of. That is why I think this statement is very, very important. Mr. Speaker, if you look at some of the things that have been referred to certain committees, maybe the reason the committees never come up with the report is simply because the committee themselves lack the capacity to understand what they have been asked to do. So I think this statement is very important, and maybe the cure to this lies partly in the yet to be outdoored or yet to be approved standing orders, and hopefully, if that is done, that will improve the capacity of all of us in this house who have the opportunity to be in this House, so that the public can get the full benefit of what a member of Parliament is supposed to do, not only in the constituency, but also within the committees which we serve, Mr. Speaker. When that happens, I think the country will be the one that will benefit more, because currently there's a limit to what I can read and understand and operate as an ordinary member of Parliament. I'm an architect, maybe I can understand when things are within my field. But what if the issues are of agriculture, which have very little Mr. Speaker, I don't have expertise in everything. I am not a lawyer. I am not, how do you call it, an educationist. I've only taught for 1 year as a national service person at a school. But as long as I can understand the import of this statement, and as agreed to by the deputy leader, who actually was nodding his head when I was speaking, I believe that this statement is very important and must be taken seriously. And I will recommend, Mr. Speaker, you give some directives for us to maybe have a deeper look vis-a-vis the standing orders that we are here to adopt. And I will urge colleagues, whenever that standing order appears on the floor, let's all pay attention to it so that within the life of this parliament, we will be able to have an updated standing order that reflects the realities of our country and makes our work much more beneficial as members of parliament. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, majority leadership. Majority leadership.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I commend my respected colleague. Oh, you cannot pronounce, you pronounce Markin, Markins. You cannot pronounce, you pronounce Markin, Markins. Markin without an S, you add S to it, then you're asking who? If you say you have never done it, I've withdrawn. If you think you've never pronounced Markin, Markins, I've withdrawn. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member who made a statement, who goes by the name Dr. Zaneto Ajiman Rollins. And so now you say Eza. You yourself who was teaching her, you say Eza. Oh, you can now say Ezanato. She's up. She pronounced it. Pronounce it and let's proceed.
Mr. Speaker, it's not Zaneto, it's Zaneto. So if the honorable member could kindly, the intonation, Zaneto, the darkness must cease. Not Zaneto.
This man says Eza. He says Eza.
But you know our
no,
people.
No, but he says Eza.
Our people,
he
when
says,
they
Kwame
speak, there's
Abuja
always
says Eza.
something.
So now is it Eza or Za? Or Ze?
Zaneto.
Now you say Eza, you. NDC will always remain NDC. He didn't, yes. You even said that Rollins is the founder of the 92 Constitution. That's what you said. What is the correct pronunciation of the name? What is the correct pronunciation of the name? She has just corrected you. Only me or him too? Mr. Speaker, she's raised a germane issue that has to do with capacity building. And without adding to the earlier position taken by Honorable Kwame, we need to look at the capacity of members, the areas they specialize in, and put them in appropriate committees. So, not only that, we need to also train members to enable them get what it takes to do the oversight mandate required by the Constitution. So this has come at the right time, and I think we are also looking at the standing orders. So even as we go through the standing orders, the committee would have to take this on board, and like the majority leader proposed, if we're dealing with the finance and economy, we look at members with that capacity. And then if we want to add on because of the numbers, then we may as well also provide some training for them to do so. So, Honorable Member, you've raised an issue very important, and I support it. Suffice to say that the comment that came soon thereafter, which suggested that the Constitution of the Republic has a founder, and that founder is Jerry Rawlings is factually inaccurate. The former president is not the founder of the 1992 Constitution. He is neither the founder of the Fourth Republic. He is neither the founder of the Fourth Republic. Okay, so just state that so that students who are listening to you will not make such a mistake. That's all I want to say. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Very well. Yes, leader. What? Leader, hold on then.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I just want to find out from the deputy leader if he's aware that the current president of the Republic, President Akufo-Addo, has described President Rawlings as the founder of the Fourth Republic on numerous occasions. Is he challenging the president, the current president, the leader of his party? Is that what he's doing? Is he saying that he's wrong?
To the extent that you are unable to tell me specifically where and when and in what context that statement was made, I tell you that you are not right. It's inaccurate. I am, however, able to say that within the context of Ms. Agboje's submission, describing Jerry Rawlings as a founder of the Fourth Republican Constitution is inaccurate. Yeah, Fourth Republic, yeah.
Honorable Leader.
Mr. Speaker, for the purposes of education, the 1992 Constitution was the collective decision of the country. You cannot describe somebody who ousted a constitutional regime and who, upon repentance, cooperated for us to found the democracy which we are enjoying today, to be the founder of that democracy. If you want to invite a debate, we can have a full debate on this matter.
Leader, please, Mr. Speaker, I find it inappropriate that the deputy majority leader should speak in terms of the former president repenting and therefore coming to be the founder of the Fourth Republic. Because as of 1992, the National Commission on Democracy was established under Provisional National Defense Council to ensure that we transitioned to constitutional rule. So I do not find it appropriate that he should stand here and say that on repentance is when Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings accepted to transition us into constitutional rule. If he can withdraw that, please.
Mr. Speaker, I wholeheartedly would agree with her, except to say that I was making a political statement within the context of repentance. However, if it doesn't find favor with you, I'll withdraw, and to state that he did overthrow a constitutional dispensation. And after a period of 11 years, he cooperated for us as a country to transition into a democracy. So if I say he repented, that's a political statement. It's repentance.
Mr. Speaker, is he withdrawing or he's maintaining that? He should withdraw, Mr. Speaker. It's not appropriate.
No, he said he has withdrawn. He said he has.
Mr. Speaker, I take exception to a member of this House referring to my submission as emotional, because I'm not sure I know any other person in this House more emotional than the Deputy Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, two wrongs will not make a right. So what I'm saying is that it's a fact that, Mr. Speaker, it's a fact that we had a democracy which was ousted. And we came into a new dispensation.
Leader, I haven't called you.
Very well.
I haven't called you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Neither have I called you, Honorable Zinato. Neither have also called you. You sit down.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to make a statement on the urgent needs for public-private partnership in bridging the road infrastructure deficit in the country. thereby reducing the burden on our national budget and consequentially, and more importantly, on the national budget. PPP is a globally accepted public sector procurement mechanism whereby the government secures commitment from the private sector and transfers certain level of responsibility to the private sector in providing public infrastructure services. Typically, it involves private capital financing government projects and services upfront and then drawing revenues over the PPP period. Mr. Speaker, in spite of the efforts made by the successive governments in the road sector over the years, the road infrastructure gap in Ghana still remains high. Ghana in 2019 was estimated to have a road condition mix of good, fair, and poor in the ratio of 41%, 33%, and 26% respectively. And this ratio was projected to 60, 20, and 20% respectively by 2024. Trunk, urban, and feeder roads have also been projected to hit 14,873 kilometers, 15,463 kilometers, and 42,042 kilometers respectively, nationwide by 2025. The projected figures were partly achieved as a proportion of road maintenance and rehabilitated improved from 52% in 2015 to 70% in 2020, yet no section of this country is without poor road infrastructure. It is also evident that the financial burden on government to fund these roads, the road infrastructure gap from the annual budget allocation has been inadequate and unreliable. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, if we so desire to improve the road network at an accelerated rate, then PPP is the surest way to go, as the tax revenue has been woefully inadequate to cover this colossal sum outlay. Historically, 3 items in the budget expenditure lines, being salary and emolument, interest on loans, and statutory payments, have absorbed over 100% of our tax revenue. They constituted 99% in 2012, 120% in 2013, 103% in 2015, and in 2016 it was 120%. In 2021 and 2022, these ratios increased to 147 and 125 respectively, and had been projected to decrease to 86% by 2025. This echoes to confirm that road infrastructure has in the past been purely financed by borrowings and grants. PPP programs is undoubtedly, Mr. Speaker, the cleanest direction without urging government to sign on to expensive loans with unfavorable terms and conditions. It is imperative to this to ensure sustainable and adequate funding to reduce the road infrastructure deficit that led to the establishment of the Road Fund in 1985, followed by the Road Fund Act 1997 at 536, with the objective of establishing secured and stable source of funding to finance the routine, periodic maintenance and rehabilitation of the public roads in the country. Mr. Speaker, the inadequate source of funding, the socio-economic effects of bad roads, and how the private investor will be attracted to this sector to bridge the infrastructure gap is what this statement seeks to emphasize. Mr. Speaker, research by the National Road Safety Commission in 2015 shows that there were 6,104 accidents and 7,465 casualties between 2004 and 2011. Mr. Speaker, other effects of relying on poor road infrastructure have been increase in traffic congestion, weak road safety guidelines, and overall discourage the use of public transport. Stress level is eventually high, and the productive workforce demotivated. A case in question is in Accra-Kasua stretch, even after the free toll policy. This has become one of the difficult roads to ply on. Traffic congestion, high cost of driving, high fuel consumption, faulty tracks, parked carelessly without triangles, as if it is a terrain without any supervision. Dangerous overtaking, particularly by the special tricycle, popularly referred to as Abubuya and the Prajas, fiercely competing with the insurable vehicles for space. Mr. Speaker, The high cost of road construction in Ghana compared with other developing and developing countries is also a major concern. Whereas the World Bank median estimate rehabilitation of $183,000, that of Ghana was between $45,000 to $700,000. Construction, which involves widening a new construction estimate, was $959,000. That of Ghana is also as high as $1.8 million. Right, Honorable Speaker, the biggest interesting question is, have all these capital projects been financed by our tax revenue? It's a big no. As alluded earlier on, our tax revenue could only cover for only 3 items in the expenditure line. By implication, and invariably, almost all the road infrastructure in this country, both current and in the past, have been financed either by external support, a sequence and a progression that could lead to sustainable fiscal discipline in the country. Not only that, it has the potential of inevitably plugging the country into both physical and monetary instability. Mr. Speaker, to avoid the political pressure on successive governments in fixing our road at the expense of other equally essential socio-economic infrastructure, coupled with low tax revenue and high cost of construction, while compromising on quality of delivery, amidst high debt to GDP ratio, inability of government to commit fiscal spending on roads, PPP is undoubtedly, Mr. Speaker, becoming a sustainable global concept that Ghana must embrace to address the road infrastructure deficit in the country. There may be several reasons why government may consider PPP, among which may include to support the country's development and to benefit the citizens to improve services. It is also the mechanism to share expertise and technical skills, improve transparency in public procurement, attain a better value for money, address the issue of shortages of government funds, improve the inherent inefficiencies and innovations in the private sector. Again, it will enable the private sector to manage some type of risk, ensure better quality of service delivery, save costs, share associated costs with government or risk transfer needs. Construction timelines ensure clear definition and specification of user needs, reduce political pressure and public monopoly while promoting competition, and an incentive that better aligns efforts with risk and reward. To serve as an incentive policy tool to lessen the lack of dynamism in the traditional public services, and above all, to minimize government budgets on expenditure. It is heartwarming to note that Accra Cape Coast Road, Accra Takoradi, and Accra Tema Road are all on PPP programs at different stages of contract execution and are expected upon completion to reduce the traveling time whilst improving the road safety and security, lower vehicle operating costs for road users, and to create jobs. In Senegal, Mr. Speaker, Dakar to the Miado Highway, completed in October 2015, was as a result of PPP between the Senegal government and the World Bank. Similar projects was undertaken in South Africa, and Lagos Lekki Port projects in Nigeria were all under AFD-funded projects with the various governments. Mr. Speaker, PPP must be encouraged to ease the pressure on government from borrowing to fund the road infrastructure gap at the expense of other key developmental pillars of the country. Right, Honorable Speaker, it is my recommendation that the mandate and the purpose of the Road Fund Act enactment is appraised to change Ghana's scopes and framework in funding the road sector. And I'm very confident that this Honorable House will support any move by the Secretariat towards this recommended direction. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, first I commend the Honourable Member for the statement. In fact, his main contention is to the effect that we need to partner the private sector to support the road infrastructure so as to lessen the direct cost on government. Mr. Speaker, his contention in his two-page statement is well-founded. And I say so because if you have a careful look at the preamble of the Constitution, and with your leave, I shall proceed to quote that the principle that all powers of government spring from the sovereign will of the people, the protection and preservation of fundamental human rights and freedoms, unity and stability for our nation. The protection and preservation of fundamental human rights and freedoms, unity and stability of our nations. And Mr. Speaker, if you come to the directive principles of state policy, especially Article 36, 2D, the state shall in particular take all necessary steps to establish a sound, healthy economy whose underlying principles shall include D, undertaking even and balanced development of all regions and every part of each region of Ghana, and in particular, improving the conditions of life in the rural areas and generally redressing any imbalance, emphasis mine, imbalance in development between the rural and the urban areas. So, Mr. Speaker, what our colleague is simply telling us is that we need to progress a little more faster in getting the private sector involved. Members filed more questions on roads than any other sector. And our constituents complain on roads than any other thing. From the Speaker, the question for consideration is whether or not the public is ready to share the cost. Because if the private sector comes in and it's not a burden on the state to pay, they will charge some road tolls, some levies, some fees. So whilst we call on the government to move in this direction of policy, we may also have to educate our people as parliamentarians for them to appreciate. Because, Mr. Speaker, oftentimes our people need development. They tell us that this is what we want. And then when tax is imposed, our people will complain that no, it's too much. So, as a political class, it appears that we lose sight of the construct. We are unable to properly explain issues and explain how we are going to get it done. An example is the e-levy, which recently became a heated debate. But then again, the public is also concerned about the wastage, the waste in the system, corruption, and how we deal with public funds. So I believe that all these imbalances, if we properly look at them as a country, we will be able to meet the imperative of Article 36 2D. What our colleague Dr. Festus Ewakofi is saying should not just be a talk. We should get it to the Minister of Roads and Transport, Minister of Roads and Highways, for him to escalate it to Cabinet, so that a proper look will be taken on this PPP policy. Mr. Speaker, I chair the Road Fund, and I know that what he's saying is really, really right. It's not about the enactment of the Road Fund, but the funds there. Mr. Speaker, as we say it's in P, and so and do bibia, sikaneswa. In other words, Mr. Speaker, the funds are just insufficient. We can't do much with it. We've awarded so much contract because of the demands from our people, yet we don't have the means to pay. And Mr. Speaker, when we do that, we destroy businesses. If a businessman procures a loan and uses his assets as guarantee, and the state is unable to pay, obviously the bank would foreclose it. And when that foreclosure is executed, there's a cash flow problem. The bank cannot really get liquidity, and it affects the economy. So, Mr. Speaker, this PPP initiative must be looked at, but our people must be ready to, accept the cost that would go directly for the usage of the roads or the benefit thereto, and indeed, of course, those who are going to be in this partnership will not be Father Christmas. They will be doing so for profit. So, Mr. Speaker, without more, let me conclude by saying that this is an important call on we, the political class. We've been given a responsibility. The time has come for us to talk straight to the people. The time has come for us to engage and let the people know that you cannot eat your cake and have it. It's a collective, and we need to work together to achieve that so that we won't get many people complaining that they don't have roads and they are discriminated against and all that. Mr. Speaker, without more, I will thank you for the opportunity.
Well, we thank you too. We have brought statement time to a close, and we would like to thank the owners of the statements, Honorable Festus Ewiakofi and Honorable Senator Ajima Lawrence, for I mentioned it rightly. I also thank the contributors.
Speaker, she says that the two of us, you and I, pronounce her name wrongly. She decided not to say it into the mic. The honorable member, the late John Rawlings' daughter.
So, honorable members, thank you very much for your contribution. So, leadership, I believe we have some bills.
Mr. Speaker, if you'll be pleased, if it pleases you, we may proceed to item 30. Motion.
Which? Yes,
Mr. Speaker, the title of the motion is the Contract Amendment Bill 2022.
So, what
item
motion?
13 of page 5.
What motion?
Mr. Speaker, item 13 on page 5 of today's order paper.
Very well. Yes, Honorable Minority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, this morning at the pre-sitting meeting, we had no idea that we were going to consider some of these bills. Mr. Speaker, this is particularly important because the bills in question, interstate succession bill, is a very big one. Second, the contract amendment bill, and then the whistleblower bill. So we are talking of 3 different bills. I plead that the interstate succession bill be stepped down. Speaker, it's a major bill so that we can debate it properly and discuss it appropriately. Probably we can do the second reading for the contracts and then the whistleblowers bill. And in these 2, we can probably discuss the second reading, then we can come back to the consideration at appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I have not made an application on interstate succession bill. I have not made an application. The application before you, which you agrees, is the contract amendment bill. Yes, I have not made an application on the interstate succession bill. I have not. What is before us, which you agree, is a contract amendment bill. So your application is yours.
Very well. So, honorable members, let me then invite you to page 5. Item listed 13. Motion by the Attorney General.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, I move that the Contract Amendment Bill 2022 be now read a second time. Mr. Speaker and honorable members of Parliament, the object of the bill is to amend the Contract Act of 1960 Act 25 to provide for mainly 2 things. First, the type of interest to be paid on a sum of money which is due to a party arising out of a contract or transaction entered into on behalf of the government. Mr. Speaker, to this end, the bill provides that the payment of interest on any such sum shall be at simple interest and not compound interest. Also, the bill prohibits a person from entering into any such contract or transaction in which the payment of interest on a sum due to that party is calculated at compound interest. A contract entered into in contradiction of this provision is made null and void. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker and honorable members of Parliament, the bill also secondly authorizes a minister responsible for a subject or department on a matter falling within the portfolio of that minister or a person duly authorized by that minister to be the only persons that are able to enter into a contract on behalf of the Republic. Mr. Speaker, honorable members of Parliament, the passage of this bill will proscribe a person from entering into a contract or transaction on behalf of a government in which the payment is calculated at compound interest. This will effectively reduce the cost of entering into transactions or contracts on behalf of the Republic. It is therefore respectfully our expectation that this Honourable House will assist in attaining the intended objective of the bill by passing the bill. I thank you very much, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you very much. Honourable Chairman, you may second the motion and read
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to second the motion, and in so doing, Mr. Speaker, I present your report. Mr. Speaker, the report has been circulated, and I pray that the Hazard Department captures the...
Mr. Speaker, first of all, members must appreciate the fact that at consideration stage, they would have the liberty to deal with specific issues and to come up with amendment. We are dealing with the policy issue here where we are allowed to make our contribution. But Mr. Speaker, let me first address the issue of the compound interest. And I must say that I agree on all fours with the respected Deputy Attorney General who moved the motion. Mr. Speaker, the old law, or the law we seek to amend, reads, per section 17, this act applies to contract and transactions entered into on behalf of the Republic, as it applies to other contracts and transactions. I'm coming there. You know I'm capable of making my submission, so take it easy. So, Mr. Speaker, the amendment is seeking to create a distinction. Government wants to enforce a contract in a particular direction. A party to a contract is not forced to enter into a contract. The rule of freedom to a contract applies. So it is important to write the law in express terms to avoid ambiguity, to reduce or perhaps eradicate discretion. If you want to ensure certainty, one cardinal principle of rule of law is certainty. Ab initio, there must be certainty in the law governing the relationship. So government wants to ensure certainty, consistency, so that ab initio you know that when you are dealing with government contracts, in the event of late payments, you are entitled to a simple interest. And the judge who may be in charge of that case will be guided by these express provisions. Mr. Speaker, perhaps it's important that I come with a recent matter I dealt with in court, where a client was claiming making a dollar claim. And the judge calculated the interest using CD rate. And Mr. Speaker, when it got to the enforcement execution stage, the issue was raised that once it's a dollar claim, it can only be LIBOR calculation and not the CD interest rate. By using the CD, it was higher. Mr. Speaker, again, there was a lacuna. And the judge was exercising a discretion. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a situation. Well, it can be 3-month LIBOR or 6-month LIBOR plus whatever margin. You know, when it comes to financial crime law and financial laws, I am good as you are. So I know what I'm saying. I beg you. But the point here is that the judge found himself in a state where he had to exercise a discretion, looking at how long the claim has taken. In an attempt to ensure justice and fairness, he said, okay, I'm applying 23% or 26%. And the adversary or the opposing party or the state said, no, this is a dollar transaction. So please don't use the CD rate, use the dollar rate. My point is that if we had a fundamental law guiding how such a transaction is to be carried, the judge will have no difficulty. Like the Chief Justice said, she is a textualist. The text will guide and lead the way. So, Mr. Speaker, as a house, if we are guided by this policy, I think we better embrace it to avoid unnecessary ambiguity. But I respect the views expressed by my colleague Bernard Ahiafo. I respect his views. Suffice to say that this is policy. And we cannot stand down because you disagree with the policy. Government says that the burden on it when it comes to this judgment debt, and if you go to the road fund, interest claims alone, indeed, that's the question. The interest claims alone are more than the principal claims. And when we're talking about expecting our judges to do the right thing, we should also guide them with express laws. And if we leave them with discretion, they may end up doing things over the roof. So, Mr. Speaker, government seeks to cure this problem. And that is why it is coming in express terms by saying that, you see, let's have a simple interest calculation. Now, Honorable Kodo argues that why don't we leave it to the individual contract? That when government is signing a contract, state so that you are going to enter into this contract, but when there's a claim, it's simple interest. That's your contention. But Mr. Speaker, that cannot work because there is a subsisting law that has certain provisions. And if we want to do a proper fundamental guide, then let us legislate on it. Let's legislate on it. What if a certain minister or a certain authorized person fails to state the policy of government? What if a government comes and doesn't really pay attention to such claims and we create such lacuna again? So, Mr. Speaker, let's get to the consideration stage where members would want to come up with certain amendment, but fundamentally the memorandum is well founded and I see nothing wrong with it. I so submit, sir.